Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to 80 Days. In the last episode, we left off being stranded in... Where were we? Oh, right, we were stranded in the town we are currently in. But where were we on our way to? It wasn't there. Hong Kong, that's where we need to go. So we need to head to Agra. I see. And from there, to get there, we need to head to Kabul. We took a room and settled in. I did some minor alterations to our clothing to better ready us for our inevitable departure. We slept for 3 days. With the last few hours of the evening, I spent a few hours walking around and found a cheerful Greek soldier who had mislaid a locket, which I spotted and who then, in between bouts of shouting, told me that the fastest way to Kabul is through Herat. I thanked him and he laughed and went about his affairs. Did he know? Spend one more night here. As night fell, I went to stretch my legs and entered into conversation with a nervous Turkish gentleman who had lost a monocle, which I helped to recover, and who then, in between bouts of laughter, let it slip that the most efficient way to Dubai is to go via Bandar Abbas. I thanked him and he laughed and went about his day. Now, how about we don't miss our train today? Camertage, or Camertage, more likely. A black metal horse reared from the prow of the Camertage, a masterpiece of Ottoman-style powered by a new type of Persian engine. It ran from Istanbul through the Persian Empire and all the way to the British frontier of Kabul. I was glad to be leaving Tehran, a glorious city, but one quite strange to my sensibilities, and besides, we had a wager to win. Still, the Camertage left us in no doubt that we were leaving. Its engines fired, and we rocketed away along the rails. The Times, Paris World Fair, a roaring success. Well, isn't that nice for Paris? One of the Armenian porters nudged his Pashtun friend and muttered something uncomplimentary as he watched me struggle to load our things into the luggage car. "It is rude to stare," I told them haughtily. "You look very strange for a servant," said the Armenian fellow, whose name turned out to be Abad. I looked the man level in the eye. "You look rather strange yourselves," I sniffed, gesturing to their porters' uniforms, which were a disastrous mixture of Persian and Ottoman fashions. They only laughed pityingly in response. Monsieur Abad tucked a purple lamb's wool pashima around my neck. "Perhaps this will help," he said rather hopelessly. I felt like a prized dog, but Monsieur Fogg made no comment, distracted by the whistles and shouts which marked our departure from Tehran. Moscow police query mysterious Frenchman. Wonder if that was us. I hope not. I woke to the gentle rumble of the train and dressed quickly, deciding to fold my scarf into my pocket as a sort of lucky charm. That is not to say, my friends, that I'm a superstitious man, but a well-meant gift is not a thing to be taken lightly. Monsieur Fogg saw it peeking out and raised an eyebrow. "Very vibrant," he remarked. It was a gift, I said with a smile. You do, he said dryly, have a great facility for making friends. I do believe my master complimented me. I could scarcely credit it. I think it was a gift of pity rather than friendship, I replied honestly. Was his only reply before he turned away and fixed his attention upon the passing scenery until the Camertage pulled into Herat, on the border of the Persian Empire and the frontier of British Indian colonial lands. I suppose one more newspaper mightn't be a problem. Phileas Fogg attempts round-the-world adventure. Well, didn't you know? It seems you'd made the papers, Monsieur Fogg. We had our papers inspected by a Persian customs officer with a pair of magnificent extending spectacles. Made of polished brass and engraved with Farsi script along the arms, he inspected our documents while turning a small lever behind his ear. A pair of smoked glass lenses slipped over the clear ones, and he inspected our documents once more. You're widely... You're widely traveled, he remarked, and coughed. We are traveling around the world, I blurted, and could nearly hear my master refrain from rolling his eyes. Oh, well, it's none of my business, the official remarked philosophically. Your papers are in order. Good luck with your travels. Good luck with your... travels. We repeated much the same experience with the British customs official a few hours later, and so we arrived at Kabul, thoroughly inspected and officially stamped. There seem to be no departures today. We should explore a little. As we explored the city, we were rather unceremoniously seized by a escort of British infantry and marched along the walls of Kabul, up the mountain ridge, into the fortress of Bala-Hissar. Monsieur Fogg protested our treatment, and I joined my voice to his, though my outraged tones rather outmatched his calm ones. We were presented to a small, spectacled gentleman in a palladial office, which looked rather more like a court, despite the piles of books and surveyor's equipment littering the floors. He gave us a glance over his spectacle rims. I am Mr. Smith, second assistant political officer to the British mission here. I do not have the pleasure of your acquaintance. You have a fine office, I remarked. Alas, my friends, I felt no contrition at my rudeness, for we had been ill-handled, and I was entirely out of temper. Mr. Smith blushed. The Durrani kings built Bala-Hissar as a palace fort. It is a little opulent for its current use. That is beside the point. That is beside the point, my master interjected sharply. I am Mr. Phileas Fogg, and this is my valet, Gerald. I am a subject of Her Majesty, and passing through Kabul with no small urgency. Urgency? The political officer's eyes flashed behind his lenses. Pray, expand a little upon the nature of this urgency, Mr. Fogg. I did not like his tone, and gave him a sidelong glare for good measure. Monsieur Fogg was not used to being on the other side of the interrogation table, and I felt rather protective of him as Monsieur Fogg explained his wager, and our resultant breakneck trip around the world. I could see Mr. Smythe growing more cynical with each word. Finally, he took off his glasses and tapped them on the table. Were you Russian or Persian spies? He said musingly. You would have a more plausible story. You go too far, sir, I broke in, abandoning common sense. My master is the most honorable man you will have the good fortune to meet. Monsieur Smythe's eyebrow raised in an eerie mirroring of my master's expression, and then he cleared his throat. A friend of mine is traveling to Omsk. I'd consider it a great favor if you accompanied her. I was suspicious. Why would it be so great a favor? You provide, shall we say, an excellent cover story. He gave me a level look. Think on it. He dismissed us and returned to his papers without a second glance. Quite a commanding fellow for a mere second assistant political officer. Interesting. Up to Omsk. be able to get... Will we still be able to get to Hong Kong from there? We have the Madras, Calcutta. Singapore. Can't say that I enjoy it that much. The trip here, don't you say? I suppose we could head down to Hong Kong. We are on the day 34. Could go to Omsk now. Or to Agra. We're due no favors to him. We will depart tomorrow. Before the night ended, I attended to Monsieur Fogg, providing him with clipped mustaches. Let us depart to Agra. We owe Mr. Smythe no personal duties of favor. We hired a mechanical palanquin for the journey and clambered aboard. Once aboard, I treated myself to some Clay's candies, root beer flavored, of course. I decided I would wait, as to not try and speak to anyone with my mouth full. Fogg Valet, the brains, full report. I must say I feel rather content with myself about that. The Grand Trunk Road, stretching from Afghanistan to Bengal, was an ancient trade route. The Maurya's had once used it to trade with the ancient Greeks, and now the British Empire had repaved and restored it for their own purposes. Mechanical palanquins laden with trade goods jostled alongside troop transports, and Trevithick steam carriages imported from England. All were brightly painted, each one bearing an individual's mark. I had no doubt the traders and drivers, and perhaps even their families, had mixed their own sweat with the paint. The day's journey passed quickly, a blur of color and sound, and it was only as the sun dipped below the horizon and the palanquins lit their phosphorescent lamps that I realized we had reached the city of Lahore. It was only a short distance from Lahore to Delhi, and we had been promised there was a particularly well-maintained stretch of road. I played whist with Monsieur Fogg with a pack of cards he had conjured up from somewhere. The mechanicals bearing our palanquin were so steady they barely jostled us at all. I won several rounds in a row, which seemed to please my master. "You are improving," he said, giving me a nod. An afternoon well spent, though I was not sorry to see the ancient fortified walls of Delhi appear out of the haze of dust ahead of us. We continued on. I was weary of being on the road so long, despite the remarkable cities and sights we had seen since departing Kabul. Yet when Agra came into view and tossed aside any remembrance of my journey upon the ancient Grand Trunk Road, at first, I only saw 4 massive stone-clad jointed legs which stood still. I could see enormous furrows raked into the earth, leading up to each leg. Oh, I had heard rumors, of course, but the truth of the vast walking city perched high atop its pillar-like mechanical legs left me with only one question. How are we going to climb up the towering edifice to enter Agra before it departed? Let's see. We could sell... Oh my! Urban Traveler. This is valuable in Hong Kong. Okay, we no longer need this. Let's take this. Can't take that. Let's get rid of our vodka here. Let's place this, shall we? New routes. Lovely. The perambulatory city of Agra was itself a wonder. The Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan had wished to build a monument to his great love, Mumtaz, and instead of a mere building, he had commissioned a roving city, the vast white granite magnificence of the Taj Mahal perched on the plateau atop its jointed, fortified legs. A fitting monument to great love, one that my Frenchman's heart could not disapprove of. Her sovereignty was a contested matter. The British had laid claim to her, but she passed through independent territories on her peregrinations. How can one claim to own a city which moves from place to place? It is as ridiculous as a notion as planting a flag upon the moon. As for me, I would not chain such a marvel with the notions of state or government. Agra was a creature unto herself, a living city who owed her living to no one. We boarded Agra at noon. She would begin walking to Calcutta when the sun set, taking us with her on her unvarying circuit. Alright. Let's get on to Calcutta. As I finished chewing one of my root beer hard candies, one of the scarlet-cloaked city officials rang a brass bell. Answering tolls echoed from all corners of the city of Agra. While the sound still echoed in my ears, the city lurched underneath me, tilting first to the left, then abruptly to the right. We were off. The walking city had begun its circuit. She settled down into a regular rhythm after a few tottering steps, and by evening I barely noticed the slight tilt and yaw, developing a kind of sea legs. Your attentions are much appreciated. Truth be told, the sound was far more difficult to accustom myself to than the Agra's multi-jointed gait. Her granite-clad feet pounded into the earth with enormous shuddering crashes that could be heard even from our rarefied station. I looked over the edge at the verdant fields below and forest below, interrupted by little thatched villages and larger brick-buildinged towns. I'm not quite sure if what I just said was a real word, which wreathed themselves in black smoke. The Grand Trunk Road snaked ahead of us towards the horizon. I felt like a giant. The earth seemed to unroll itself for my inspection. Farmers and horses and cows below seemed pale and unreal, and altogether insignificant. In that moment, I was only solid. Only I was real. Thankfully, the moment passed quickly, but did not soon return to the railing. But I did not soon return to the railing. A man thought strange thoughts perched atop a migrating city with an engine for a heart. My master and I took a turn about the top deck, marveling at the glistening white marble edifice of the Taj Mahal, bounded by clear blue water and manicured gardens. A photographer had set up a booth on the lawn and was doing a brisk trade, taking phototypes of families posing in front of the magnificent monument. His hands were stained with chemicals, with dark burns visible against his brown skin. He was experienced at his trade. He glanced over at me appraisingly. "Photograph?" he asked in a passable French. £10. "Ma oui," I agreed, and then glanced at Monsieur Fogg and invited him to join me in the picture. He glanced at the photographic apparatus with evident suspicion, and then at my hopeful expression. "Very well," he said shortly. I stared at him, mouth agape, for a full 20 seconds. I had not imagined that he would agree. We posed beside each other as the photographer made his equipment ready. I could barely keep the grin from my face. There was a blinding flash of white light, and by the time my vision had returned to normal, the ferrotype was already being pressed into my hands. A handsome article in some light. I could almost see the barest hint of a smile upon my master's lips. I tucked the ferrotype into my pocket, and we continued about our promenade. As I was taking a small digestive walk after a substantial breakfast, when I saw a young lady in a bright pink sari and yellow-lensed goggles pitch herself over the outer railings. I leapt across the deck and immediately entangled myself in some coils of rope which toppled me onto the railings in a slightly less heroic fashion than I intended. I peered over the edge, bracing myself for a traumatic sight, but the woman waved up at me cheerily, suspended from the railing by a thick hemp rope knotted about her waist. I waved back, though my fixed expression could hardly have been described as nonchalant, even by the kindest critic. The woman sought me out at luncheon, by which time I was much recovered, and then introduced herself as Daya. "Mademoiselle Daya," I bowed. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance." She laughed in surprise. "Your manners are very fancy." I invited her to sit with me, as was only polite, but she shook her head. "I don't eat up here," she pronounced derisively, before glancing at me with bright mischief. "We are a city of many levels. The real Agra is below decks. I'll take you down tomorrow if you want to do more than sightseeing." She swept away into the crowd, leaving me to contemplate her challenge over my meal. Interesting. Of course, I went below decks. I am a man who cannot resist a challenge. Daya told me of some of the history and layout as we descended a series of stairs of increasing ricketiness. The upper deck was devoted to the Taj Mahal and surrounding pleasure gardens which housed the tourists and wealthy pilgrims, and was perhaps but 1/10 of the population. As we passed the rest as we descended, until we suddenly stopped. My guide raised her hand. There was no one about. I was beset by the sudden thought that she had brought me to this empty spot to rob me. Then she opened a pair of carved doors, saying with grave ceremony, "Welcome to the lower city." Blinked my eyes against the light, and as I adjusted, I saw where we were. We had come to a township built within the echoing walls. I gave myself a slight tap on the mouth, making sure that I could still speak correctly, and tried myself once more. Built within the echoing bowels of the city, complete with shops and residencies, and even children playing games on the street, though these children tossed adjustable spanners and brass rings. Gigantic dials and levers arrayed the distant walls, whose purpose Daya attempted to explain, though it was rather too technical for my uninitiated mind. Daya was clearly a well-known figure and introduced me to her fellow lower city folk with great pride. Almost everyone wore tool belts and yellow-lensed goggles. "So," she asked, turning on the spot with hands outstretched, "what do you think of my home, Frenchman?" It is fantastic, a hidden world, I declared, making up for my own mispronunciations and missed words in my speech. I would not have dreamed such a place ever... I would only give this one more go before dismissing myself from her presence shamefully. I would not have dreamed such a place existed beneath the parks of the upper deck. Daya nodded at my response, as if turning it over in her mind. "The truth is, I think, that all cities have a decks, my friend. She said, Agra's is just more obvious, or less depending. All too soon, I heard the sound of the bells which signaled our stop. The room around me exploded into controlled chaos. Brass-goggled men and women pulled enormous levers, threw open iron gates, and shouted instructions at each other in a storm of languages. The city lurched to a halt, and the great heart stilled. We had arrived at our destination, the British city of Calcutta. Good lord. Calcutta was an industrial city which had built its wealth on opium, textiles, and indigo, but that was not to say it was uncultured. The chai shops which I passed by were all thronged with affluent babus and behenjis discussing poetry and literature, and the sticky subject of Indian independence. It seemed a natural outcome of events, and I said as much, to be loudly shouted down by several pro-British voices, who in turn were shouted down by those fervently in favor of self-rule. It was certainly a thorny issue, and I wondered if we would be able to avoid all consequences of it. Where is the most dangerous right now? I asked, and a woman nodded. I hear the mountains to the east are teeming with separatists, she declared. They mean to attack Chittagong. I returned quickly to Monsieur Fogg. It seemed nothing was really welcome here for the market. But with that, I will definitely be ending here in Calcutta. When I return with Monsieur Fogg, I hope to see you all here, and that you enjoyed this further installment of 80 Days. Hopefully, Monsieur Fogg and myself will make it back to France within 80 days, so as not to lose our wager. Remember, if you did enjoy this, show support by buying the papers. Of course, if you didn't enjoy, don't buy the papers or read about us at all. And, if you're feeling really generous, perhaps seek us out if you're in a town we may be arriving in, or are about to arrive to. Especially Hong Kong. If you know that, if you were, I suppose, listening to this, and live in Hong Kong, perhaps you could go and meet us. It shows us that you enjoy what we are doing here, and that you support us and would like to further see us win this wager. But, without further ado, I will end this current installment and see you all in the next one. Farewell.